All right, hello everybody, good morning. My name is John O'Brien. I'm actually moderating the track today, so if you're mostly in track A, I think that we've got people out there still trying to figure out where they're going since we're just starting up. Like this one here is track A for the day, so our first session. I think we were just commenting how the notebooks and different things I've seen have different presentation names kind of up. Here's what I do know, it's 10:45. We are starting with Wayne Eckerson, and it looks like his presentation's on self-service. So, and this is track A, so that much I know is correct. So why don't we go ahead and just kick it off. Wayne, longtime friend, colleague, gosh, we go way back, that's for sure. So it's always a pleasure to hear about what he's working on. And the other thing I'll mention is we'll have questions, but we're going to try to hold the questions till the end. So let him get through all of his material for everybody, and then we'll facilitate some questions here. So Wayne, I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. Oh, this is on. Good, good. Great to see all of you here. You can turn that off. Yeah, I presented yesterday at the tutorial. Was anyone in that session? Okay, you may hear a few things similar from yesterday. Yeah, so the topic's on self-service, but it's also on data analysts. Because I think data analysts kind of are the linchpin that will make self-service work. Turn this down a bit. So I've been talking about self-service for a long time, and on the surface it seems pretty easy, but when you get into it, it's actually really hard. It requires the right organization, the right people, the right tools, the right processes, and the right architecture. So we'll go through most of that today, but I actually am going to focus on data analysts. Here we go. About me, I run a research and consulting company specializing in data analytics. I've been doing this for 30 years, written lots of reports and articles, and we've consulted with a lot of organizations, mostly strategy and design work. So if you want to learn more about that, I'd be glad to talk to you afterwards. So the agenda today is, we're going to start with what is a data analyst? How do you organize and align them? How to govern their output? How to train them? What tools to give them? And then how to retain them. So again, I think they're critical to whatever you're going to do in the data analytics front. If you're not serving their needs, I think you're going to have a big hole in your program. So before we start, I need you to take a quiz, okay? To see how well you're optimizing the use of your data analysts. So, either in your head or with a pencil, if the statement that I read applies to your organization, give yourself 1 point, okay? I've got about 15 of these. So, our data analysts can't keep up with business requests. They're becoming a backlog. 2, our data analysts are order takers who do not work strategically with business partners. 3, our data analysts build lots of disconnected dashboards, creating a fragmented view of data for business users. Which means the users have to go to 4 or 5 different places to get basic operational statistics. 4, many of our data analysts are glorified report writers. 5, our data analysts lack sufficient domain knowledge to be effective. 6, our data analysts have trouble communicating findings that business people can act on. How are we doing so far?
6.
Good. Our data analysts are isolated in departments and rarely interact with each other. Buried in the basement. Our data analysts spend more time finding and cleaning data than analyzing it. Yeah, I think everyone's going to check that one, right? That's the inverse of how good your data and analytics enterprise architecture is. What is this? It's too small here. It's number 9. Our data analysts never rotate through departments or build cross-functional knowledge. They're stuck in one domain. Never see the light of day of anything else. Our data analysts lack curiosity to explore data beyond actual projects. And I'm going to actually temper that one. Not necessarily just lack curiosity, but may not have the time to explore and build actual projects, one or the other. Take your pick. Number 11, our data analysts spend more time maintaining past reports than building new ones. Number 12, our data analysts continually reinvent the wheel and rarely reuse work from other analysts. Seeing some smiles out there now. 13, our analysts create more reports than they decommission, creating report sprawl. 14, our analysts don't apply the right type of analysis to business questions. And last, but not least, business people don't view data analysts as strategic partners or resources. So this kind of summarizes my talk in some ways, and I think what I think is important, but in the inverse, right? So the rest of the presentation, we'll flip the script here and talk about how to do this in a positive way. But add up all your points, okay? Now, if you got between 10 and 15, sorry to say, you're dysfunctional, okay? From an analyst perspective. 5 to 10, you have an ineffective data analyst network. If you scored less than 5, you're doing pretty well. Do we have any winners here? Okay, anybody in the 5 to 10 range? 2, 3, 4. Okay, anybody want to admit being in the 10 to 15 range? Oh, okay. Sorry to say that. We'll talk afterwards, okay? Could use some help. All right, so let's start the basics. What is a data analyst? You probably all know this, but let me go through it. We used to call these folks Excel jockeys because that was their tool of choice. Still is in most cases, especially finance. Also been known as power users, business analysts in some cases, so that has many meanings. Today, the tool of choice is Tableau or Power BI. Departmental analyst, data lieutenant, data mashup artist, sometimes data scientist, although that's really a slightly different role with more academic training, who deeply knows statistics. Typically, these people are hired by a department head in finance, sales, marketing, operations, and they're basically in the back pocket of that department head, there to answer any questions they might have about anything in the world, right? So their job really is to do ad hoc analysis, to answer in the moment data questions. It's hard for the enterprise data team to support them because you never know what they're going to ask next, right? Or what they're going to need next. So from an architectural perspective, which we're not going to talk about as much today, they really do need to kind of have virtual access to not only stuff in your warehouse and your data lake, but even beyond that, and even external data, if they're really good analysts and they're really answering new questions. What kind of skills do they need? They do need curiosity and a desire to explore data. This goes for data scientists as well. The more they can navigate and explore data, the more they're going to become facile in using that. They need to be critical thinkers. The killer is they need strong communication skills. Okay, and this is what separates a good analyst from a great one, right? Being able to talk the talk of business, be able to interpret data in their language, very important. They should know SQL, they should know statistics, and they should know which type of analysis to apply to a given problem. Descriptive, diagnostic, or predictive. And the role of an analyst has been evolving, I think, and will continue to evolve. But there's some analysts are just really more glorified report writers, to be honest with you, but they've got that title. Other analysts are doing, mashing up data and doing cross-functional analysis, cohort analysis, things that you would expect a data analyst to do. And some are tipping their toe into data science and doing predictive modeling, forecasting, things like that. There's a wide range of what we kind of expect analysts to do. And if you're coming out of college, it's a great role to be in. This we'll see in a little bit. So why am I focusing on data analysts? I've given you a hint already. I think they are the linchpin between business and technology and key to making self-service work. They are the most active users of data. So it behooves us all to pay a lot of attention to their needs. Because if you can meet their needs, you're probably going to meet the needs of everyone else as well. Most importantly, they're going to be your greatest political allies or your greatest political liabilities. So if you don't make them happy, they're going to be really upset and sabotage you at every step, right? But if you go out of your way to meet their needs, they're going to be your biggest supporters. To help, if you need to implement, get support for an enterprise data strategy, they'll be right there with you, helping you advocate for that. As I said, they're a bridge to the business. And if you're in IT, if you're in enterprise data, you need as many bridges to the business as possible. They're the leading edge of requirements. They are the next generation of data that goes into the warehouse. You really need to be cultivating what they do and watching what they do, because if what they do becomes popularized, that needs to be brought back into the enterprise environment. And we need kind of a workflow for managing that, which we'll talk about. So there's one director of BI I worked with for a long time, and his goal was to get the majority of his users using 80% of his reports, the IT, the enterprise data reports, stuff that his team built. But 20% he wanted to be ad hoc reports coming out of the business, generated by these data analysts. And he made sure that he was watching what they were doing so that if there's something that really bubbled to the surface, that he brought that back into the enterprise environment, productionized it using standard tools and platforms. These folks are key to fostering data literacy. They're sitting in the department side by side with business users who could probably do more to take advantage of data and analytics. So I think we need to start fostering that informal channel of coaching and support, and these data analysts are a great way to do that. Collectively, they can be very expensive, and there's not too many executives who understand exactly how much they're spending on data analysts. And as I said earlier, data analysts, the number of data analysts is inversely proportional to the quality of your enterprise data architecture and environment, right? So if you're struggling on the enterprise side, you probably have a proliferation of data analysts that are hiding out in the departments, in the business units. I like to go into clients and ask them, well, how many data analysts and pseudo data engineers and data scientists exist in your organization? And no one ever knows. I never get an inventory. So sometimes we have time and we go take that inventory, like we did at one university. We didn't spend too much time, and we found about 87 people who had kind of a data analyst, data engineer, data scientist role. And if you add up their salaries, even if it was just part-time work, it was in the millions of dollars. And when executives find out about this, they're kind of appalled. And this is a good way to sell an enterprise data program. It's like, oh, you guys, we're spending so much money very inefficiently by throwing manual labor at trying to manage our data and cleaning it up in an isolated fashion. And we're duplicating ourselves at each step of the way. All right, how to organize and align data analysts. As I said, they're embedded in the business, right? And that's great because we want the business to be agile. We want them to be close to the customer. We want them to use data to make decisions quickly. And that's really the role of the data analyst. So they're in blue here. They're sitting out in the department. We call them technical generalists and domain specialists, right? They're going to know finance inside and out, and they're going to apply sometimes rudimentary, sometimes pretty good data and analytics skills to answer those questions that we talked about. Sitting on the other side of the fence is the enterprise data and analytics team. They're generally technical specialists and domain generalists, which is why if everyone has to go to IT to get something built, it's going to take forever because they don't know the domain well enough to make it happen quickly or effectively. In the old days, the red box did everything, right? They built everything, they designed the architecture, managed the data, built the reports and dashboards. Today, we're pushing much of the report generation and most of the data preparation, not the data ingestion, but the data preparation to support reporting and dashboarding out to the blue side here. All right, so these analysts, as I said, they report to business unit leaders. They build local reports and dashboards answering their questions. The enterprise team today, their job is to manage enterprise data, data that's shared across business units. Ensure it's governed, quality is good. If there's a need for an enterprise application, a report, dashboard, something that's cross-functional, something that's really complicated, then they're going to build it still. The big change is that their job is turned from one of dictating what happens to facilitating what's going on out in the business units. So they're more facilitators and coaches of what's happening out in the business. And that's what this dotted purple line is. The dotted purple line is what you need to design and build and pay a lot of attention to. How do you bring these two groups together? Because in most organizations, they're kind of miles apart. The analysts in the departments are doing their own thing. They're creating their own reports, and they don't jive with any other reports in the organization. And trying to aggregate those to create one view, which the CEO and CFO want, is really hard. So somehow, we've got to work together. So at the highest level, I think what needs to happen is the red team here needs to facilitate. And more than that, they need to, I think, be involved in hiring the data analysts in the departments, evaluating their performance, and training them, which might mean you should have someone on the enterprise team whose job it is to do that, especially if your organization has dozens, or like in the case of that university, hundreds of embedded data analysts. Department heads don't know how to hire these people. They don't know what skills they're looking for. They often hire the wrong kind of data analyst for what they need. So they need some guidance. They don't know how to evaluate the performance, so they need some guidance from the enterprise team. They have no idea how to train them or what training they should send them to. So they need some guidance from the enterprise team. In turn, the blue team is going to offload work from the enterprise team. They'll build those local reports. They'll do it faster and better than the enterprise team probably could. And there'll be a place to go to consolidate requirements for enterprise-type work, right? They're kind of like the eyes and the ears of the enterprise team out in the business. That's really important. And as I said earlier, they can help coach and support the casual users in their departments, improve their data literacy. So this is a little bit of what goes into that dotted purple line, right? But from an organizational perspective, what we see companies do is, all right, we're going to go from a decentralized approach until we bump up against the problems of that to a completely centralized approach. And I bet some of you have been through this. When the CEO and the CFO finds out all the data analysts or pseudo BI developers that are out in the business, they kind of freak out. And their knee-jerk reaction is to, well, we're going to centralize them and get economies of scale and efficiencies, right? So what starts out as decentralized moves to a centralized environment. There's pluses and minuses of each approach. So in a decentralized model, when your analysts are embedded in the business, embedded data analysts as I like to call them, they have strong domain knowledge. In fact, they may know the business better than some of the business people do, which makes them good candidates to be like product managers if they want to go that route. The department heads, they control their own destiny here. They've hired these people, they're theirs. No one else is, they don't have to share them with anybody, right? So that's good. The problems are, as I've mentioned, they may not be the right type of analyst. They're not managed or coached well. They may be isolated in their department, which over the long haul is not good for them. They don't continue to learn. And if they don't feel challenged, they're going to leave. They're going to be easy targets for recruiters. And of course, there's no economies of scale. If you flip to the other model, we see some corporate, a lot of big financial services firms like to centralize all their analysts, right? And the benefits there are economies of scale. It's kind of the opposite of the decentralized approach. Efficiencies, they're managed, they're trained, they work more collaboratively. But you lose a lot. The big thing you lose is they lose their domain knowledge. And without their domain knowledge, they're kind of useless, in my opinion. Again, it takes them a long time to ramp up to understand your problems at a deep level. They're reactive instead of proactive. From a departmental head perspective, now I got to wait in line for this resource? Forget it. They're not going to do that. So what do? As soon as they have to wait in line for a service like data and analytics, what do? They go hire their own analysts again, and they disguise them. They give them titles that people won't recognize as what they're really doing, right? So now all of a sudden you got double the trouble. You've got a centralized analyst team, but you also have these surrogate analysts out in the field. So you've just made things worse in some ways. Or maybe better. Departments lose control, and I can't even read that. Now, if you're smart, what you end up doing in life, as well as in technology, is you federate, right? Instead of flipping back and forth, which I've seen companies do, you go from decentralized to centralized, and they flip back to decentralized. When they hit the problems of that approach, they flip back the other direction. But really what you want is to kind of cut it in the middle and get the best of both worlds. And there's a couple of different ways to do that, but the federated model says you get economies of scale and efficiencies, you ensure that the analysts get domain knowledge, they rotate through domains, and they're managed and collaborative. Problems are departments have to cede some control, and they may have specific needs that maybe corporate can't meet. So as you see up here, there's two different federated models. And I've seen them both. And I've seen them both work. And I've seen companies have both centralized and embedded analysts, and that can work too. But the first is a decentralized coached model where the analysts are sitting in the department, they're hired by the department head, but they're managed by the corporate team, or at least actively coached by the corporate team. The other model is that, well, okay, maybe they're all centralized, but we're going to assign them to a specific domain for 2 years and then rotate them. So they spend maybe 2 or 3 days a week in the domain and then 2 days maybe at corporate, right? So either of those models can work. And as I said, I've seen most companies probably have a little bit of both. There's just some departments that are going to need their own embedded analysts, even if there's a centralized team. And that's fine, as long as they're working together. The benefits of the federated model is that there's going to be some centralized enterprise standards and tools and architecture that all these analysts are going to be trained to use and leverage to their own benefit. And they're going to be actively managed. So I'm a little afraid to ask this question, but does anybody kind of have this kind of federated model at all where the embedded analysts or analysts are managed from an enterprise perspective? Why not, Dan? Why is this not happening?
Pendulum swings, and then it swings back.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in the decentralized.
You would think after a while executives would learn that you just can't keep swinging back and forth. It causes so much churn.
I don't remember the last swing, because
They weren't there, right? Yeah, so it takes an enlightened executive to federate. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about that dotted line, how to organize analysts. There's other things that you can do. I'm going to build out this framework. The other thing that I think needs to happen organizationally is you need data and analytics needs a board of directors. People in the business, your analysts or the managers of analysts, typically will sit on an analytics council, cross-functional team that serves as a board of directors for the enterprise data and analytics leaders. So they'll review the strategy and the roadmap, they'll review the standards, they'll refine them, they'll approve them, and they'll typically push it up to an executive committee. Does anybody have an analytics council? Okay, does it work? Yeah? Good. Because if you're an enterprise data leader, you don't want to be a lone wolf crying, hey, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do. You need to have a cross-functional representation behind you. It makes selling your strategy on an annual basis much easier. The other thing that's really helpful for data analysts is creating communities of practice. Because they're all kind of buried in their departments, but if we can create a community of practice where they all get together in a meetup, a webinar, monthly at least, to share tips, tricks, and techniques, it's really going to start to benefit them. As we'll see later, they should also have a shared platform so they can see what everyone's doing, and then reuse some of the workflows that they're building. All right, how to govern their output. This is where we're getting a little bit more into the self-service. So on the surface, self-service seems like a really good thing, right? A win-win. The business users get what they want, when they want it, how they want it. They don't have to deal with IT anymore. And IT doesn't have to deal with the business anymore. They can go focus on more value-added activities, build out the enterprise data platform and architecture. And everybody's happy. Not so fast, okay? I've seen this happen way too many times that as soon as you empower users with new self-service tools, what do? Especially the data analysts. Whoo, they go to town, baby. Now it's so easy to create reports and dashboards. And if that output isn't governed, oh my God, you've just made things worse. It would have been better if you didn't empower anybody. Because now you have 50,000 different versions of the truth, and no one trusts any data except what they generate themselves. And that's not a fun place to be. You get spread marked silos, executives are tearing their hair out. They just want an answer to a simple question. How many customers do we have? And they get 10 answers. Users get frustrated. No one trusts the data, and there's just a lot of rework. So self-service can go really awry if you don't govern it. And in fact, I said this yesterday in my tutorial, don't ever mention self-service analytics without saying governed self-service analytics. Okay? Governance is a little bit of a break on the ability of users to go do their own thing, but in the end, they will appreciate that break. It's like, would you drive a brand new Maserati that didn't have brakes? You could go really fast and, crash and burn. Right, when you drive a car, you want brakes. When you implement self-service, you want governance, okay? Now Otherwise, you have a Tower of Babel. So I talk about this data governance gateway. So we are empowering these power users down here, data analysts, data scientists, to go explore the data, answer new questions, go grab data from wherever it is, mash it together, come up with new insights. Great, we want that. You know, don't inhibit that. But if they push the button to share it, that's when things have to change, especially sharing it outside of their department, right? Then it needs to go through a governance gateway. If other people outside of their immediate group are going to use this information, it needs to go through a data governance review process, which I'll show you, on its way to becoming a standard report or dashboard. It might need to be handed off to a different team to produce on the enterprise platform. So you may need to take data that was in Excel and actually somehow move it into the data warehouse. So this thing can scale and not break, not be a tinker toy that when the analyst leaves, no one knows how it works, right? We don't want to build reports and dashboards with duct tape and baling wire, right? So if something's going to get used, let's push it through this data governance gateway and make sure it's fit for purpose for the use of the majority of the organizations, who I call casual users, data consumers, data explorers. They're about 90% of your employees, sit in the blue, okay? I didn't have it on here, but the blue is really, well, the yellow here is what I would call self-service, true self-service. They'll go get data, mash it together, and build something new. Above, those people don't want self-service. That's way too much work. And they'll just screw it up because they'll forget what you trained them how to do. They want silver service. And that means they want data and information served to them on a silver platter. They want just what they want, how they want it, which means you, the enterprise team, someone, has to go figure out what they want in advance and build it. I said this yesterday in my tutorial. The best thing you can do for your organization is go to every department and build out a data mart that will generate the operational statistics that everyone in the department needs and hardly ever get. And if you just go department by department, build out an operational dashboard, you're going to satisfy most of the people most of the time. But no one does that. I don't know why. Why is that, Dan? Why does no one do that? Well, they got other priorities, right, I guess? Okay. All right, here's a, oh, this didn't quite, this didn't build, unfortunately. So if you're an analyst here, where are most people on this side? If you're an analyst over here, there's a couple things you can do. You can create a personal report. Say you're exploring stuff and just trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Ideally, you create something yourself and you store it in a personal workspace in your BI tool, or maybe your data warehouse has a workspace that just for you or your department. But if you're generating something for your department and your department has governance, which I would recommend, you should go through this review board where they check the data, the design standards, they check the quality of the data, the calculations, and the performance. And if it passes, they give it a little watermark or stamp and certify that thing as fit for the department's use. Same thing applies at the enterprise level. If you're trying to create something, this analyst, that they want the entire organization or a lot of it to use, there should be an enterprise review board that does the same thing and make sure this output conforms to policies and standards and procedures. And if it does, then they get the seal of approval. This little seal of approval is a really powerful change agent. The 90% of your employees who are casual users, they'll glom onto that because they want to use things that they can trust. And if they see that watermark or seal, it says to them, oh, this has been vetted, it's been reviewed, I can trust it. So here's a quote from someone we worked with. Quote, "Our watermark has really changed behavior in our organization. When executives open the Tableau report, they first look for the watermark in the bottom right corner. If it's not there, they ask why not and question the data." Now, all the analysts who don't want to be slowed down by governance, now they just jump right in line. It's like, okay, if I want people to use what I'm doing, I got to go through this governance process and get that watermark. It really is a change agent for your organization. Also, the person said, "Our Tableau users are eager now," these are the data analysts, "to go through the governance process to get the watermark. We also require them to pass 2 tests to get a Tableau desktop license." So there's standards, right? And not anyone can be a data analyst. You have to actually show some competency, right? Anybody doing this? Anybody certifying reports and kind of indicating, yeah, is it working for you?
It works fantastic.
Ah, see? Yeah. All right, how to train data analysts. I wrote a book called Secrets of Analytical Leaders a while ago, and one of the featured people was Ken Rudin. I had about 7 featured people, and he was, at the time, the director of analytics at Zynga. Then he went on to do the same thing at Facebook and then Google, and now he's at ThoughtSpot for some reason. But he became like the analytics guru in Silicon Valley about how to do analytics and how to get your teams to be analytically proficient. So he had all these pithy sayings, and one was focus on questions, not answers. You know, too often data analysts are just ready to dive into to get the answer for something. And they don't spend enough time to find out, oh, well, what is this person really trying to accomplish? What is the bigger picture here that they're not telling me? Because if I give them what they want, if I give them the answers they're asking for, it may not actually solve the problem. Focus on impacts, not insights. He found a lot of his analysts, and some of them were more data science-y. They were just enthralled with the idea of doing these statistical models. And what they lost sight of was the business need. And he eventually, well, he used this little saying to get them to focus on, I don't care if your analysis is on the back of a napkin. If it's going to solve the business problem and have an impact on the business and the metrics by which we're evaluated, that's all I care about. And in fact, he changed his incentive system to reinforce that. And the last was be a consultant, not an order taker. You know, too many of our analysts just, you know, as I said, just do what they are told to do, especially the ones that are more glorified report writers. The idea is to be strategic, be a partner to the business, try to help them understand their own problem better before you build something for them. The goal is not to produce actionable insights. The goal is to produce results. An actionable insight that no one acts on is worthless. It's kind of the same thing that Ken's saying. So ask the right questions. We said a lot of this already. What are you trying to accomplish? What's it worth to you? Here's a big one. All right, if we give you this information and this insight, what are you going to do? Are you going to change anything? Because if you're not going to change anything, then forget it. We're not going to do it for you. I actually had one lady, Kathleen Maley, who's been an analytics head of analytics COE head at major banks. She takes that stance. If you can't tell me what you're going to do if I give you the answer to this, I'm not doing the work. I'm not using my valuable resources to help you. And also, the corollary was, are you ready to implement these actions? Because if you're not going to do it for another year, then let's wait. Kind of tough-minded. And when you deliver answers to business people, don't remember they're not analysts. They don't care how you got the answer. They just want the question that they gave you at the top of the slide and the answer at the bottom and a chart in the middle. That's it. They want one slide. Keep it simple, stupid. All right, technology. Where are we for time here? What's the time? I'm time? I have what? 15? 17 minutes, okay. We'll make it. Technology for data analysts. They're tool hungry, or should be. They have a big workflow. The first thing they have to do if they're answering a new question is go find the data. They got to understand it, search it, profile it, sample it, validate it, make sure it's the right thing. And to do that, they need a data catalog and a glossary of terms and definitions. Once they get the data, then they need to kind of prepare it, mash it, clean it, join it, calculate it, enrich it. And for that, they need data prep tools. And unfortunately, most data analysts spend 80% of their time doing this, right? When really, we want them to spend most of their time doing this, doing the actual analysis and visualization, for which they need analysis tools, AutoML tools. I would even throw in augmented analytics tools, which are these newfangled tools that kind of do correlations in the background for you, like an analyst would, but they do it, and they do hundreds or millions of these calculations in real time, and then spit up the most interesting ones for you. I should have put that on here. I think every analyst needs an augmented analytics tool in their toolbox. And then they need to share it and publish the data. Typically, they don't have all these tools. And I think we'll see the emergence of what I'm calling a self-service analytics workbench that provides this. My favorite tool, the one that I know right now does this, is called Prometheum, which I mentioned yesterday, right? It's a new tool, new startup company. It was started by a guy who started a data catalog company. And he got really frustrated because customers kept saying, well, it's great you're showing me all the metadata about data. What I really want to do is actually access the data. And he said that the most important feature in a data catalog was the search button. So that's what he started with. Prometheum is based on natural language search to go find anything in the organization because it's based on Presto. And they've refined it so it actually works in a federated way at scale. It's really impressive what they've done. So they'll go find it, and they'll go get it for you, and you don't even need to know SQL. They'll join it, and then you can keep manipulating it. They have some visualization, they have some pipelining, they have some workflow based on it. So it's kind of everything in this diagram here. A one-stop shop for a data analyst. So I wish there were more tools out there like that. I mean, I think people use Alteryx in this way. Anything else that you guys can think of? Otherwise, they're just using Power BI and Tableau and maybe some SQL query tools. Yeah. But more importantly, I think this needs to be part of an enterprise platform so that all your analysts are using the same platform so they can learn from each other and follow each other, like using social cues. Your administrators then can start to build things into this environment that keeps everybody on track. Build some guardrails so that everyone's doing joins the same way. Everyone's handling slowly changing dimensions the same way. And then ideally build workflows so that users can communicate with analysts through this platform. And ideally search for stuff, and if it's already been delivered, it will pop up immediately, or create a channel to an analyst who will work on the problem for you. So I think that's coming. Prometheum has all that, which is why I like it. It is new, though, so who knows if it'll be around in 2 or 3 years. How to retain data analysts. This is kind of an org chart and a career path chart. A peer relationship chart that I put together. So analysts are these purple people right in the middle, at the bottom. You know, they're a blend of business and a blend of IT. It's a great place to start your career. And then from there, you can fan out in many different directions. And by the way, I just uploaded these slides, so they're on the conference website. So, you know, you can take the analyst track and maybe get some additional training, go from level 1 analyst to level 2 analyst with experience, get some additional training, become a data scientist. Or just keep moving up the food chain, become director of analytics, chief data officer. You could go into the business track because you're pretty akin to a product manager. You could go the technical track, become a BI developer, maybe a data modeler. Or the governance track, become a head of data governance. So it's a great place for most of these analysts are pretty young. And they want to see a career path. That's what I've figured. They want to see the future, and they want to know the steps to get to where they want to be. So one way to retain them is to give them that career path. Work with HR, come up with levels of analyst work, show them the options from a career perspective, and I think they'll be a lot happier at your organization. They have something to shoot for. Oh, what's this? Oh, and then rotate them, right? Ideally, if you have that, if you've managed that dotted purple line, now you can start to rotate them through departments. You know, a level 1 analyst, you'll want to rotate them through a department or two where there's an analyst manager who can coach them and school them. If you're a level 2 analyst, then maybe you rotate around and manage different analyst teams in the organization. And same thing for data scientists. All right, so I think that's it, actually. So in summary, as I said at the start, I think the analysts are the linchpins to your data analytics strategy. They're the bridge to the business. They're your biggest political assets or your greatest political liabilities. So manage them well, treat them well. They're a source of data requirements and a key to data literacy. So I think the first thing for you guys to do is find out who they are. You know, take an inventory. Align data analysts in a federated manner. Also create an analytics council, your board of directors. Establish communities of practice to get these folks together, talking to each other. Empower them through training on proper communication skills, how to work with the business, and give them the right tools. Ideally, a workbench, self-service analytics workbench, like I talked about. And retain them by creating career paths and rotating them through departments. So that is all I had.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and I have a mic here to help everybody. If we have any questions, anybody on? I have a whole list, so don't worry. I've known Wayne forever, so
Damn.
I can't
I was
resist.
going to get out of here early.
Yeah. Here, let me give you this. I believe it's on.
Hello, my name is Diego. At one point in your presentation, you were talking about you want to be a consultant, not an order taker, which is great, and I agree with. But I think some people might find themselves in a situation where they can't be the consultant because leadership or maybe their direct supervisor treats them as someone who takes orders. What type of attitudes or discussions should someone like in that situation have to try and turn it more towards a consultant relationship?
Well, you know, that's actually a really interesting question. I would say if you're one-on-one with a business person, it's just you and the business person. Be a consultant. Try to ask. It doesn't require that much. Just ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? Try and get the bigger picture. That's one question. That's all you need to ask. Right, Dan? Yeah. One question. And that will help you become more consultative, right? And if the company doesn't like you doing that, I would find a new company to work for.
Yeah, I would just add, I come across the same thing. It's really a mindset when you're sitting down with the business user. I usually am helping orgs say, what's the problem we're trying to solve together? I'm your partner in this, right? Don't just ask me questions. What are we trying to get to? Because you probably know lots of other data sets and things in the organization they don't know of that you can pull in. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Dan. Do you have any experience using the 5 whys technique from Toyota in that regard?
The sidewise?
The 5
Oh,
whys.
5 whys. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I used to be a reporter, and that's the bread and butter of what reporters do, is just ask, keep asking, why'd you do that?
Yeah.
Although I've been told through active listening books I've read that you shouldn't ask why now. It should be more like how. The 5 hows, maybe. But yes, the 5 whys will, if you ask that 5 times, the notion is that you will finally reveal what the true issue is underlying someone's request. Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to do that?
Hi, I'm Chad. Early in the presentation, you mentioned that data analysts are on the leading edge of requirements. One thing that we typically do with our data analysts is we involve them in the requirement process, but that also inhibits their production on new stuff because they're producing the old stuff and then working on requirements. So I'm curious about, do you have a reaction if it's good to do that, or should we be rethinking that to actually include analysts in that process of defining the data requirements?
Maybe I should clarify that statement. They're on the leading edge of requirements. I would say that the work that they're doing could turn into requirements for future enterprise development, right? Now, if you're doing an enterprise project, the best place to go maybe to get requirements are data analysts because they're subject matter experts, right? But yes, I think you really want to watch what they're doing out there in the field and see if what they're creating is becoming more popular. And if it is, put it through that data governance gateway. So that's what I meant by that. And did that help? Did that answer your question? Think so? Okay.
Any other questions? Here we go. Great. So everybody can
Just let you run over here. Yeah, thanks. I'm really interested in the kind of idea about like a seal of approval or excellence on tools that are built. I'm kind of curious, I guess. We have a lot of reports and dashboards at our company that have been built at different stages of maturity of our data warehouse, and some of them at this point, it's like, oh, they're no longer in sync with what we're using today or whatever. And people know that, and so I think this is actually something that would be really valuable at our company. But I'm curious how you do that in a way that is actually meaningful and not just like we threw a watermark on this report and we didn't on that one. Like you've talked about like councils or committees, like what kind of processes?
That
can help make
watermark
it
is
meaningful?
hard earned. It's not easily obtained. So I did show the process by which that you would have to set up. It's a report governance process, right? Right? And this is actually a simplified version of it. Yeah, you have to earn that watermark. Now, there's another issue that you kind of brought up, which is that a lot of companies are swamped with reports, and they need to purge them, right? You could probably delete 80% of your reports and no one would notice. But you obviously can't do that. You have to have a process by which to do that. One thing that I see some companies doing that's very helpful is buying a tool that I'll call a BI portal. And especially if you have multiple BI tools in your organization, it brings all your reports and all your tools into one screen for users. They can go one place and get any report from any tool, companies like Synoptics and Metric Insights are the big providers of these tools. So it's great for the user, one place to go, and not just reports, it could be even just metrics or charts from those reports, and they can build their own portal, BI portal. But from a report sprawl perspective, it's even better because on the back end, it allows administrators, BI administrators, to see the usage levels and track the usage levels of all these different reports, and even compare reports side by side to see how similar or different they are. And that gives them data to use as ammunition to go to the users to say, hey, we're going to delete all these reports because no one's using them. Oh, and by the way, executives, we got 5 BI tools, but we can see here that 2 of them are being used very little. So maybe we should save some bucks and get rid of these 2 and port the reports that we now know what they are that are being used to this other tool. So every company, I think, especially if you have multiple BI tools, needs a tool from Synoptics or Metric Insights. I've seen companies build their own versions too.
All right, so I only get 1 out of 99, Wayne. So just following on to that question right there. So I agree. I see the difference between analytics governance and data governance, especially in the self-service world. But how important, because you had a slide on this, how important do you think it is for companies to standardize on one tool? I mean, when they have 3 or 5 BI tools or data prep tools floating around, how important is it for them to try to drive everybody into one standard platform when decentralized means anybody can do whatever they want?
Yeah, it's a tough battle to fight. I mean, IT loves to fight that battle, and it usually is not worth winning. It's hard to get people off of a tool, and it's hard to decommission or convert reports. Just a lot of time, and what's the value in it, right?
Right.
So, you know, unless it's a real expense issue and you're getting heat from the CIO or CFO to like reduce costs, I'm not sure I would bother with it. But that could be blasphemous. So what do you guys think?
Anybody else have thoughts on that one? It's something I think we both see all the time. It's you know, the question of warehouses that have been around 15, 20 years or greenfield opportunities. So.
I mean, it does make IT's job harder to support 3 tools and train people on 3 tools. It is hard.
Yeah.
I was just going to comment that I think it's really a matter of the size of the enterprise. From my experience, if you're dealing with an enterprise level company, you're never going to be able to wipe that out. But absolutely get to one tool.
Yeah. No, I agree. The number of tools, the size of the company, pick your battles. It's just, I think one of the things you have on a slide is this enterprise versus departmental competency team, and you know, trying to have competency across, it's the struggle. So I was just curious for input. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're right at time. So we've got a 15-minute break now, and we're going to start back up at the top of the hour with the next session before lunch. Thank you.